Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Understanding Blockchain and what it can do for supply chain. You're all very welcome to the session today. This is our 7th webinar that we are running here at the Clinton Leadership Institute around the space of digital transformation. And these webinars are all there to support businesses, both micro and small businesses, who are interested in applying for the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund. So as I said, we are number 7 on the list. We're down here in our blockchain session today, and there is one next week around building your digital strategy. If, however, there are some on the list here, and you can read down through, we've had big data, smart tech, AI and ML there in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning. If there are any of these that are of interest to you, even though the dates have passed, you can pick them up on our YouTube channel and watch them in your own time. Just by way of introduction today, myself, my name is Brenda Clerkin, and I am a Senior Lecturer of Practice here at Queen's Business School. I'm also joined by Kieran Kelly, who is a CEO and founder of Ubloquity, and you're very welcome today, Kieran, and many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Hi, everyone.
Just starting off then with a bit of background just around the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund itself. So it's a demand-led grant scheme, and it's all around trying to develop small and micro businesses in the space of digital transformation. And it's really there to help address any financial barriers for this particular group of organizations, so they can get the benefit of digital transformation as much as any other business. So the fund is there to support small and micro businesses on their business transformation journey, and that's really important. That if you're applying to the scheme, that you're able to demonstrate that you are transforming your business, and it's not just about digitalizing or digitizing your business. And I'll speak on that in another little minute. So it's a capital grant program. So in other words, it is there to cover capital expenditure only. So no revenue expenditure can be claimed under the fund. And there's 7.5 million available in the fund. And it is run through all the local councils in Northern Ireland. So, do approach your local council to start the whole process off. It's administered by Newry Morning Down District Council, and it is also supported by Invest NI. In terms of being able to apply to the programme, there are a number of criteria that you need to meet to be able to apply. They're listed here, just around being based in Northern Ireland. You have to be either a small or micro business, so no more than 49 employees, VAT registered and trading for at least 12 months. It's open to all sectors apart from agriculture, forestry and fisheries, and that's because there is a separate fund available for that particular sector. You do have to have a digital transformation plan or equivalent, okay? So to apply to the scheme, we really do want to be saying that the technology that you want to adopt is part of a bigger plan in terms of how you're going to transform the organisation. And I should mention that our webinar next week around developing your digital strategy is all around supporting how you would put that digital transformation plan together for the fund. If you want to apply, you have to be applying for one or more of the 6 technologies covered by the scheme itself. A list of those technologies are available on the website, and I'll share that link with you shortly. Has to be of a capital nature in terms of the expenditure that you want to claim using the fund. And so, as I said, any revenue or revenue expenditure won't be allowed to be claimed. So any subscription type costs or idea generation type costs won't be covered. So it does have to be capital in nature. And then, as with all grant funding, you do have to comply with state aid and de minimis levels relating to that. So in terms of the fund itself, we are now just about to begin call 4 of the fund, which will open in February, March next year. All right. The whole process starts by submitting an expression of interest, and the expression of interest process is opened at the minute. So you can express an interest at any point for the future calls. So you can go onto the website, the link is there, you can use a QR code. It will take you through and give a bit more detail in terms of the process that you will go through as part of trying to submit an application through the fund. There are a number of pre-briefing sessions that will be run by all of the councils across Northern Ireland. They will kick off around February time. So do please keep an eye out for your local council and come to those in-person events and hear a little bit more about the programme, about the fund. So in terms of our webinar for today, this one is around blockchain with a focus on how it can be used within supply chain. So I want to start right back at the beginning in terms of just understanding what blockchain actually is and how it works, and then bring that knowledge into how we can apply it to the supply chain. I'm going to hand over then after that to Kieran, and Kieran's going to share some insight into how his organisation, uBlockity, has helped some of our local firms adopt blockchain technology in their supply chain, and he will run through the journeys that those types of organisations have went on, the benefits and the challenges that they have experienced. After that, then I'll just signpost to a little bit of further help and support, just in case you're interested in learning a little bit more about blockchain or proceeding with an application on the DTFF fund. And then we'll do a Q&A. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to just type them into the chat function. And we'll answer all the questions at the end, or at the end, if you just want to unmic yourself, you can ask the question directly. Okay, so to get started off then, just to really get a good understanding about what blockchain technology is before we then start to see how it might be applicable to our supply chains. There's a couple of key points here. To take a step back, I suppose, before going into the points, for me, blockchain is really, it's a place to store data, if you were to strip it back to its really simplest form. And that data can take many different forms. It doesn't have to be financial data. A lot of people associate blockchain with financial data, but it doesn't have to be. There could be data there about personal data, there could be medical data, there could be warranty data, and as we're going to focus on here today, it could be supply chain data as well. So it's a digital ledger of business transactions, and that's distributed across an entire network of computer systems. And that's really different to how we store data today, because if you think about it, you know, in terms of storing data today, if you and I were trading together, I have all my data over here in terms of my records and the transaction list. You have all your records and transactions on your side, and there's two sources of information. With a blockchain, however, blockchain operates on a distributed ledger basis. So all of the parties within the blockchain, so if you and I were transacting on a regular basis, we would be on a particular blockchain, and all the transactions would be visible to both you and I at the same time. So the information is decentralized across all the users or all the nodes on the blockchain. So it's used for recording information that is impossible to change or hack from the network. Okay, so there are a number of security features within the blockchain that are very new in terms of security features in comparison to what and how we store data today. So there are a number of things like a consensus mechanism, which I'll talk about shortly. There are digital fingerprints, there are security mechanisms like hashes and IDs, digital IDs, and addresses that help keep the blockchain and help keep the information within the blockchain very, very secure. So when we talk about the blockchain, as the name suggests, it is a linkage of a number of blocks together to form this blockchain. And each block contains a number of different transactions. And as I said earlier, those transactions can take many shape or forms. It depends on what your blockchain is set up to do. So it could be financial transactions, it could be supply chain or whatever. And all of these transactions are recorded on each participant's ledger. So in other words, everyone has access to the same information at the same time. There are a number of encryption features as well with it to keep it very secure. I don't go into too much detail in this webinar on those encryption features because they can get quite technical, but they are individual, unique identifiers that help keep the information within the blockchain quite secure. Blockchain does not have intermediaries, making it a decentralized system. So there is no one central authority that holds all of the information. And if you want the information, you have to go to the central authority to get it. Now the information is disseminated. As I've said, it's decentralized. So anyone who is on that blockchain has the same information to the rest of the people on the blockchain. So there is no one sort of central authority holding all of that information anymore. And in a blockchain system, the authenticity of a transaction is verified and confirmed by its participants. And that is what I refer to as the consensus mechanism, which I'll talk to on this slide here. So some of the key characteristics with it. So it's a decentralized ledger. So in other words, everybody has the same information at the same time. It's immutable. There is a number of security features that will ensure that the data within the blockchain is accurate and cannot be tampered with. There's user anonymity. So when you're using the blockchain, it's not that your name comes up, that you're the user of the blockchain. There are addresses used, and addresses are identifiers in the form of unique numbers and letters to form a unique identifier for each user on the system. Execution, the way in which the blockchain operates, there is less human involvement, more automatic execution of transactions, in particular what we would call smart contracts. And I'm going to circle back to that as the webinar progresses. I mentioned this consensus mechanism a couple of times now. And this is all about making sure that the transactions that arise are approved before they get onto the blockchain. So with a blockchain technology, there has to be a majority of participants who agree with the transaction before it will get on the blockchain. And that's a really big part of the security feature within the blockchain, because it prevents fraudulent transactions from happening. It's not as if a user can go on and enter a transaction in the hope that it will get onto the blockchain, because once a transaction arrives onto the once a transaction is created, it is passed around all the users of the blockchain for their review and approval. So it just means that all the transactions that get onto that blockchain have been approved. So only approved transactions get onto the chain. And with all of that in mind, that increases the transparency with which we can operate on the blockchain. So we all have visibility in terms of being different users on the blockchain as to the transactions that are there. So very different features and characteristics to the blockchain to what we have today in terms of maybe just regular databases for storing and sharing our data. So I've mentioned here about 3 generations of the blockchain. So the blockchain technology is probably one of the newer type technologies compared to some of the other ones we've looked at on previous webinars. Blockchain technology really sort of came to the surface around the time of the financial crisis, so 2007, 2008. And they arose when people lost faith within the financial system and the banking system. And we had a number of big commercial banks that collapsed at that particular time. And the emergence of cryptocurrencies started to come through, like Bitcoin. And those cryptocurrencies, if anyone happens to dabble in them, they are all based upon the blockchain technology. So the technology that they operate on is blockchain. So that's where it sort of started to gain a little bit of momentum back at that juncture of the financial crisis. Since then, we've had blockchain 2 and into blockchain 3. Blockchain 2 brought in this idea of smart contracts, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Blockchain 3 then was a further development, and it introduced the dApps. So in other words, it gives the blockchain a capability to go beyond itself in terms of its functionality. So say, for example, there was an element within the blockchain that needed exchange rates to convert foreign transactions. Blockchain 3 allowed the technology to go to a reliable source, for example, a website which had reliable foreign exchange rates, and bring in the different rates as and when it required onto the blockchain to allow the conversion of those transactions. So I'm just going to come back and talk about these smart contracts, because this is really a growth area that we're seeing within the blockchain technology. So what are they? They're really all about contracts that execute automatically, okay? And they execute automatically when a particular trigger point has been reached. So you will set up the blockchain to say when a particular point in time happens or an event happens, X number of procedures after that are to happen. And rather than having human interaction coming in and executing those procedures, the blockchain smart contract will execute those procedures automatically. So let's just take a quick example. Say, for example, you had a rental contract with a landlord, and maybe after the first year, your rental payments went up by 5%. So if you think about it, how you would do that in a real world scenario today without blockchain, you would be contacting the bank to increase your rental payment to the landlord. You'd get in touch with the landlord to make sure that they got the payment at the right time and for the right amount. And you'd probably be digging out your rental contract to make sure that you're increasing the payment by the right amount. So quite a lot of human involvement there, and a number of nuances you have to go through to increase that rental payment. Say, for example, we moved that onto a blockchain, and what we would do is we would code into the blockchain that in 12 months' time, the rental payments would go up by X%. And once that point in time is reached, say at the 31st of December, their next rental payment would be increased by whatever 2 or 5% it happened to be, without the need to then go through the intricacies that I've mentioned previously around pulling out your rental payment and contacting the bank, because that would all be set up to execute automatically. So we're seeing a lot of traction here in terms of where smart contracts can be utilized within businesses. It might relate to the payment of goods and services. It might be to record a certain part of a transaction because an event has happened and the next part of the transaction can now happen. So yeah, there are contracts that execute automatically within the blockchain. So putting together what I've just covered in terms of the features and the characteristics of blockchain, how does it actually all pull together then? And hopefully this little diagram explains that for you. So first of all, the transaction has to be created. So this might be a transaction where you have a buyer and a seller, and the seller wants to make a payment to the buyer. That transaction gets created. And the transaction then gets communicated across to all of the parties on the blockchain. So it's very open and transparent. There is no doubt about that. So the transaction gets communicated to all parties in the blockchain. And that idea of that consensus mechanism kicks in then, because we need the majority, or 51% of the parties involved in the blockchain, to review and approve that transaction. Okay. And then only once it's reviewed and approved, does it actually get appended onto the existing blockchain. And then over time, the transactions build up within each particular block. And then as a block fills up, the next block is then started with the new transactions coming on board. So having an understanding now in terms of the characteristics, and then so roughly the flow of how a transaction might work on the blockchain technology, I want to then move this now into where it can be used within supply chain. And there are a number of different areas that where we see this being utilized. So first of all, here in the develop phase. So in terms of being able to get greater access to information, say around materials or the source of the materials that you might be using maybe for R&D purposes. So if you have a blockchain that has a number of different materials on it, and you can see exactly where they were sourced and how they were processed, it means that you have a better repertoire of information of which to choose, which materials and to use maybe in your research and development. We can also use it from a planning point of view, because it allows us to plan with our suppliers what inventory levels we want, what risks there might be attached to certain materials or stocks or raw materials that are there. And it allows us to plan how we're going to store and when we're going to have to store our materials as they arrive. In terms of sourcing then, and this is really about reducing our sourcing costs, okay, because we do have, as I mentioned, those smart contracts earlier on, where we have less paper involved and we have the automatic execution of certain tasks within the blockchain. In terms of make then, so say, for example, we are outsourcing some of our product and we want to understand exactly how our third-party provider might be obtaining their raw materials, how they're processing, where they're storing them, how long they're sitting before they're being delivered to us, all of that information. We could have access to that and therefore make more informed decisions as to how we service our own business. We also use it from a deliver point of view. So in other words, understanding the journey that our products has went on, right from where they were derived from, and the processing and the journey that they have went on to get to the end customer. So there's a traceability element throughout the supply chain. And Kieran will mention that through some of his examples later. And then return. And we've seen a lot of businesses use blockchain for this purpose. And this is maybe where you've had a product recall. And by having the blockchain information of where each product originated and the journey that the product has went on, you're better able to recall that product back with a fair degree of accuracy in terms of where the exposure is, maybe in the retail stores. And one case of where this didn't work and blockchain wasn't in place at the time, but it certainly has been in place since, was with Walmart. Walmart many years ago had an E. coli outbreak in their vegetables, and they weren't able to pinpoint where the outbreak actually began. So what farm did it originate on, and therefore what stores did that product arrive into, and where the infected product were sitting. And as a result of that, Walmart had no other option but to lift all the vegetables out of all their stores across America. So you can imagine the amount of food waste was in that. But from a health and safety perspective, they had no other option. They had no traceability of where their product was infected and the journey that it had come on. And they're actually one of the companies that have since introduced blockchain for that very reason. And now they have that traceability right back to where the product arose and what farm it actually came from. So good benefit there in terms of product recall. And then from the different parties along the supply chain, because supply chains can be quite complex, a number of different parties playing a part in the journey. So you might have here, starting off with the supplier, and the supplier wanting to be able to prove authenticity of their goods. In other words, where have the goods come from? How have they been extracted, maybe from the ground, or how have they been processed in whatever manner? So to be able to verify and to be able to add weight and authentication to that can be a big benefit for a supplier. In terms of the manufacturer then, so maybe wanting to understand, where their raw materials have been sourced. Have they been ethically sourced, if that's something that's important to them and important to the end consumer? Having the traceability to be able to see where the journey that the raw materials have taken can be very impactful. The regulator as well. So the regulator having the ability to see where product is being, what borders it's crossed, that all sort of can tally through in terms of maybe health and safety regulations, in terms of monetary regulations and movement of goods as well. Having that traceability for the regulator can be beneficial. Logistics as well, and part of the supply chain. So for them to be able to understand when goods are arriving and when they need to move, under what conditions might they need to be stored, what type of goods are they receiving, and any special conditions that are attached to those. So again, having the visibility of that is a nice tool to have. The wholesaler and the retailer then understanding the movement of goods. So when are they moving to the wholesaler, and then when are they heading off to the retailer? And for the retailer in particular, who might have a big part of their sell to the end consumer about the authenticity of the goods and being able to stand over the provenance of the goods that they have on their shelves, and to give the assurance to their consumers about that, can be an important marketing tool for retailers as well. And then from a consumer point of view, as an end consumer, providing consumers with really an end-to-end understanding of where goods have come from, the reliability and traceability of what they're actually buying, and helps then to counteract some of the fraudulent products and that are out there that can't prove the authenticity and can't prove the traceability through the supply chain. So different members across that supply chain all getting different benefits of utilizing this shared ledger, the shared database, with this information being provided in various means. So if we were then to compare where we are today in terms of our traditional means of supply chain management and versus blockchain, a couple of the key things to think about. The data integrity, so to be able to stand over and the accuracy of the data with the blockchain, it is tamper-proof because of the numerous encryptions that are used to get the data onto the blockchain, and also that consensus mechanism. Whereas at the minute, we just don't have that. Data is tamper-proof. Is not tamper-proof in our traditional databases. Security, then, we are decentralized protection. So all parties have the same information. So if there does happen to be a potential attack on one particular aspect of the blockchain, one particular user, everybody else still has access to the information. So it's not lost. Whereas you're a wee bit more exposed in the traditional sense, where it's all centrally protected. And if there is a potential breach of that information, that information is gone, and you're left exposed. Data verification. So with the blockchain and that consensus mechanism, remember I said that no transactions can get on the blockchain until it's verified by the group. So it's achieved under the blockchain, not so within the traditional mechanism. And then government regulations. So the ability to demonstrate that you have met the government regulations in whatever shape and form they are. We can do that using the blockchain in a quite open and transparent manner, whereas with the traditional means, it's a little bit more cumbersome to actually prove that you have met the regulations, and it could differ from one organization to the next, whereas blockchain, you might be able to streamline that so it looked similar across organizations. So lots of different sort of benefits coming through there in terms of integrity, security, verification, and government regulations. So I focused here just in terms of trying to bring this to life a little bit more around food supply chain, because there are so many issues out there at the minute with food supply chains, for example, around food wastage and food frauds, sustainability playing a big part, and food safety as well. And then, like all supply chains, there are a number of different parties who play a very key role in the whole cycle of the production process and onward to the consumer. And so starting right from the very beginning, we have producers, distributors, and processors all getting the benefit of being able to have the transparency and openness to understand where their food and the journey that food has come from in terms of being sourced and processed and moved along the supply chain. And then equally on the other side, from a consumer perspective. And it can help decrease the risk of reputational damage, absolutely, because you're able to stand over your product. If you're using blockchain, you're able to prove the journey that it's come on. You're able to prove its authenticity. And if you're saying that you're supplying fair trade coffee or whatever it happens to be, that you do have an ability to demonstrate that to your consumers very clearly through the blockchain mechanism. I've put up here just a little case study here around Walmart. I've mentioned them earlier on in terms of their leafy green vegetables. They started their whole journey of blockchain a number of years ago, back 16, 17, and they tried it really on a proof of concept basis on their pork and mango movements across the world. Their pork was moving through the Chinese market mostly, and they were able to add certificates of integrity to the blockchain to prove its authenticity and to prove its value as an end product. They also utilize it for their mangoes to track that across the US. So you can imagine the amount of detail that would be behind that. But they managed to utilize blockchain to trace the distribution of mangoes around the US and to be able to track it down, something that would have taken 7 days previously without blockchain. They were able to trace the movement of their mangoes in a short window of 2.2 seconds. So the information was all openly available on that blockchain. So once they did prove that out in terms of proof of concept, and I know Kieran will talk about that later on as well, about making sure you try it small before going big, they then moved into the IBM Food Trust, and other partners came on board to try and expand this technology. And, it does take these big investors like Walmart to test and try these technologies, to open the way and to develop in the manner then that we can utilize them in our own organizations. So there's a couple of extra pieces of information there just around the Walmart journey itself. Just to highlight then very briefly, there are a couple of different types of blockchain. So we have permissionless and permissioned. A permissionless blockchain, or it can also be referred to as a public blockchain, is one where you don't need to be invited onto it. So for anyone who, say, for example, who trades in any of the cryptocurrencies, they would be a public blockchain. So you don't have to have a special invitation to join. There are what's called permissioned blockchains, and this is where you do need special permission to join, and therefore only the parties that are relevant to the transactions happening on the blockchain will be invited to join. And this is the side then that's obviously more attractive then to businesses, because only the parties relevant to that particular set of transactions are on that blockchain. It's not that everybody has access to it. And so how do you know which one is suitable to you? Well, it comes down to who do you want to have access to the information and who can record information on that blockchain. So if anyone has access and anyone can record, that's a public blockchain. But if it's more narrow in terms of only having validated users or certain users on the blockchain and able to enter information on the blockchain, then it would be a private blockchain what you'd be looking for. So how to implement the blockchain? I'm not going to talk through this because Kieran is going to cover this in his session, just to give you some real world flavor to that. So I'll skip over that. Some of the companies we see utilizing blockchain, I mean, they're very big companies, but again, it takes the investment by these big companies to develop these technologies. So a couple of different big names there. De Beers for the diamond company really wanting to cut into, and the black market trade that's there at the minute for diamonds, and therefore they're using blockchain to be able to prove the authenticity of the diamonds that they sell. So lots of different benefits then around security, reducing costs, improved speed and efficiency, particularly with the smart contracts that execute automatically. We have traceability right from beginning to end, and transparency, and it's immutable. Now, there are some challenges just before I hand over to Kieran, just about the scalability of this technology. It is still in its infancy, and certain costs attached to that as a result. As time moves on, this will become a more scalable technology. There is a bit to go with it yet. It's immutable. Yes, as I said, that was a good point. Also can be a double-edged sword in terms of being a negative point, because once data is saved, it can't be changed or reversed. So you do have to think about the implication of that. The consensus mechanism sometimes can slow down the approval of transactions. That's if it's a manual consensus that's needed. Other times, blockchains can be set up with automatic approvals built in, and that will speed that up, but it's a consideration all the same. Few developers with specialized knowledge. Again, it's a relatively new technology. It's gaining momentum now. So in terms of specialized expertise, we have people like Kieran on the call here as a whole business who operates and helping other businesses implement blockchain technology. So I'll let Kieran speak to that. Regulation isn't quite there in terms of blockchain technology as yet. It's still in the making. So there's more to come through on that. And then just, getting the value, making sure that you get some value out of the technology and being able to identify that up front. And there's just a couple of key takeaways just in terms of a summary of what we've covered. So I'm going to pass over to Kieran. I'll just stop sharing and pass over, Kieran, to yourself to share some real world examples of companies that have implemented blockchain and how that has worked on your side.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brenda. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, a huge thanks to Sean, Brenda, and the team at Queen's, and also at DTFF for giving us the opportunity to share the benefits of blockchain. And as a company based here in Northern Ireland, we've been specialising in it since 2014, in its infancy as it started to commercialise. But I'd like to focus in and help the folks on the call to understand the DTFF. The DTFF is there to help us as businesses innovate and to help you as business leaders innovate and use technologies such as blockchain, IoT, and artificial intelligence to help change and digitally transform their businesses. And we have the privilege as specialists to work with organisations thanks to the DTFF, which is lifting Northern Ireland's economic uptake out on this. So I would encourage everyone on the call, if blockchain is not a panacea, it's not the answer for everything, but the call is open for innovation and digital transformation. And blockchain, where blockchain is right, is very, very powerful, and I'll share that with you. I'm also going to put a link into a tool that will hopefully help you guys understand how easy it is to help with digital transformation, and it's called Working Backwards. It's a methodology that was used by a very prolific cloud provider to start with the end in mind and work your way backwards. and understand who's involved, what's involved, and how do I get there. If you think of the DTFF as a fund that will provide you with access to innovation, this working backwards will help you put a foundation in place to help your business digitally transform and adopt technologies such as the blockchain. To Brenda's point, I see it very simple as digital Lego. And everybody loves playing with Lego until you stand on it. And then when you stand on it, it's possibly the most hateful thing in the world. But if you think of everybody sharing the same Lego set, if I add a block in my section, Brenda and everyone on the call gets to see that block being added. And as Brenda said, it takes away intermediaries and it creates this community architecture. Now, Northern Ireland is a massive community. And if you think about this, we are innovators in ourselves. You look at the Martin Baker ejection seat, you look at the defibrillator, you look at the engineering feats of heavy industries that went on in Northern Ireland, and you think more frequently of the like of Axle 3D, who are using 3D technology and 3D print to design body parts that surgeon can test out on. This DTFF fund is there to help you embrace that innovation. And in this community architecture, we start to share information. So the platform that I'm going to show you now is a synthetic view of what we created to support Brexit. The problem that we were addressing was how do we move goods frictionlessly between GB and Northern Ireland and GB and the European Union. That was a massive problem because in decades we did not have to fill out customs excise forms, we didn't have to fill out declarations, and we certainly didn't have to worry about moving goods across borders because there wasn't any. Then when Brexit came, we exited out of the European Union and all of these rules went up all of a sudden. Traditional data and traditional databases didn't solve the problem. So by creating this connected community, we as technologists started with the end in mind. What was the challenge? Need to move goods from A to B frictionlessly. And then we looked at who was involved in that. So I'm going to show and share with you the platform that was built to support this frictionless trade. And please forgive me, everybody has just gone down into a small screen in the corner of my screen. So I would ask if anybody has any questions or queries, please just open your mic and give us a shout. So as I say, the problem we addressed was how do we move goods from Belfast to the EU and the EU back through the land bridge into Northern Ireland. So by creating this connected community, we're going to look at a consignment of aircraft seats. This is synthetic data, it's not real. It's just to show you the concept of aircraft seats moving from Northern Ireland into and including a tier 1 airline in Germany. Now, the people that need to be involved in this are Stena, Customs, Border Force, the customer, so the consignor, and the consignee, the person that's taking them. So whenever the data is put on in the location, that data gets adopted to the blockchain. It's consumed out of the customer's ERP system and creates the first block that's called the Genesis block. And that goes into a carrier or a lorry that, as Brenda was sharing with you, involves the logistics provider. Now, this is where IoT comes into play, or Internet of Things. We attached a small secure seal to the back of the lorry, independent of the lorry and the TMS, or the traffic management system. As soon as that lorry left the yard, it automatically let Stena know that it was coming. And it gives Stena a view of who was driving, the lorry number, the trailer number, and its manifest, so what was on the back. And Stena then assigned what ship it went on and what sailing it went on. Now, in behind the scenes, the customs agent for that company uploaded the customs documents onto the chain via an application program interface. So they didn't have to come out of their own program. They just hit a button and it sends it up to the blockchain. Now, this is where Brenda was talking about actors, people on the blockchain who have a trusted view and who can commit and communicate data onto the chain. As soon as that boat knew that that lorry was coming, the benefit to Stena is that they could position lorries and trailers on the boat to allow that and accommodate that lorry if it was going to make it. If it didn't make it, and the legacy way they used to do it was they used to phone the driver and ask, are you there yet? Are you there yet? Are you there yet? And of course, with every lorry driver, they said, yes, I'm just round the corner. But they could see the inbound lorry and they could see, yes, it's going to make that sailing. Now, the cost savings for that for Stena were amazing because they now could ensure that there was no spaces on the boat, that everything was filled. And if that lorry wasn't going to make it, they could take another one off the dock and put it in. And therefore, that sailing went out full. So once that boat broke the head point from Belfast Harbour, it pinged and sent the information to Liverpool. So Liverpool could see the Edna, they could see the trailer coming in, and they could see the trailer number and everything that was on it. So therefore, they didn't need to inspect it. Now, the seal on the back door meant that it was closed the whole way across and didn't need to be opened. So therefore, they became a trusted trader. Now, trusted trader, red lane or green lane. So it went the green lane. Didn't get stopped, didn't get any inspections, and it drove straight through the port. That saved 20% alone in being able to visualize that data and see that those trailers coming through. Now, imagine if that was on farm or if it was in your own business. If you could have advance notice of products coming in, what could that do to your business? And through the same blockchain, we have a food processor in Downpatrick who saves 70 man hours per day because they can see inbound loads into their warehouse. And by doing that, they can maneuver production to accommodate those inbound loads. Now, through this program, we do not dictate the route that the lorry takes, but remember, the lorry has changed this time. It's an English registered lorry. The trailer remains the same and the seal is on the back door. So as soon as that trailer passes London, it notifies Dover of its inbound time. What does that mean? Well, if anybody has gone on holiday through Dover, you see the backlog of lorries or the backlog of cars. Because Dover can see this data inbound, they can actually prioritize who goes where, and therefore saving tens of thousands of hours in vehicles inbound that they can do traffic management on. And because the seal hasn't been opened, they hand that data across to Calais. And Calais, again, because the seal hasn't been opened and because they have the data, they green lane it. So there's no need to interact with or drive any of the inspections into that load. Now, as soon as it hits Calais, the customer here can see its ETA and its ATA. ETA is the estimated time of arrival. ATA is the actual time of arrival. All of this, as Brenda said, is one single version of the truth on this connected ecosystem or blockchain. So because they can see it inbound, they hold less stock. Now, for every 1% we save that airline, it's 10 million euro. And over the last 18 months, there is a periodic combined saving of 31% across the entire supply chain. Now, let's see what blockchain looks like in behind all of this. So we create what's called a chain of custody, and that means we link all the blocks together. Now, I will say to you, in this instance, the value of the data is 4 times more valuable than the load itself, because data has a primary value for the people that are reading it, a secondary value for the people that want to run analytics on it, and a third value for the supply chain members themselves. because it's trusted, because it's in a chain, it's structured data that you can now run analytics or AI over the top of it. It is the best data that you can get because it's all interconnected. And because we work with a single version of the truth, all of the documents and manifests are included in the blockchain. In fact, you'll see this is a blockchain code that's written across the top. And as Brenda said, it's immutable and it cannot be changed. That data is linked with the journey data, including all of the customs data. So whenever we see all of the information, port authorities and customs and the HMRC can see this data at the same time. So therefore, it's not at risk. So therefore, they let it go green lane. Now, all of that data is bound in this chain of custody, and the blockchain stitches all this together in the background so that all of this data is referenceable at the same time. Now, what feeds the blockchain is the systems that are running within the customer site. So it's ERP for production, warehouse management, traffic management. So you don't have to come out and feed data into the chain. Your systems feed that data in automatically. And therefore, we remove not only friction, we create cost out, we create cost reduction or support cost reduction, and we increase compliance. All of this data is linked in one single window. Pre this being installed, users had to ship or move between 5 or 7 different systems. There was a high rate of error between copying cells from a well-known workbook into a web app and vice versa. And the error rate was very, very high. So therefore, goods were getting stopped, things were being delayed, and typically those delays were costing a small fortune. Now, one of the customers in up around Derry, London Derry, asked us to put in what we call a POD or proof of delivery. So they run an SAP system. So whenever the seats were delivered, the driver had this information on their mobile device. It's a simple fold-out phone where they could actually sign the data. And before they lost, if one was rejected, the whole consignment went back. If that was food, it's unacceptable because food, as Brenda was saying, was the cornerstone of how blockchain was developed for provenance. And there is people in Northern Ireland currently using blockchain to support digital twins or the provenance of livestock. But here we can take a digital signature, we can submit that we receipted this, 50 broken. And that data gets written to the blockchain, but it also kicks in and sends off a signal to SAP. And this is where the smart contract comes in that Brenda was talking about. It kicks a signal off to the SAP to say, okay, pay that bill less the 200 or the 50 seats that were broken. And you can then get into a dispute. But the smart contracts in this scenario automate a lot of the process and take heat out of the engagement. Now, it doesn't only have to apply to supply chain. We are very lucky to work with a very exclusive guitar maker in County Down who makes guitars for artists like Ed Sheeran, Niall Horan, Lewis Capaldi, Eric Clapton, and Bono. And he's now using the blockchain to showcase the provenance of his products and to be able to tell the story behind the brand. Now, it's having a sea change of opportunity for him because you can now connect with the guitar by literally just holding your phone to a sensor that's in the headstock. And that's driving positive economic change for Northern Ireland. Now, I realise we have a short time left. And really what I want to say to you all is we have the opportunity to create change in every one of our businesses. The DTFF fund And the folks in Queen's are saying here today there is a huge opportunity to consume and build that digital transformation into your business through the working backwards and talking to either ourselves or some of the cloud providers, AWS, Google, Microsoft. You can start to do things much, much smaller and reduce the expense. Brenda, Sean, and the team at Queen's with DTFF are taking the barrier to innovation away by providing access to those funds. And those funds can help your business and can help your employees deliver the change that is coming. And for me, it's better to drive than be driven, and to help make those changes openly, but be in control of those changes, whether it's compliance, cost out, digital transformation to reduce burdens or overheads, increase productivity, or customer obsessed, connecting with the customer, or analytics. There's an opportunity to use that fund to transform your business and to grow as individuals. And it's my privilege to support Brenda, Sean, and the folks at DTFF by getting to share with you today how businesses across Northern Ireland and the UK are benefiting from the fund and benefiting from that digital transformation. So at that, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to hand back to Brenda, and please, the floor is open to any questions or any queries that anyone may have. Oh, thank sorry, you. I do have a give, actually. I do have a give. Working backwards is a fantastic tool. And if I may, there is, oh, I can't put the chat in. I can send it to Sean, and Sean can put it in afterwards, or Brenda. But if you Google working backwards methodology, or use another very well-renowned browser, doesn't have to be Google, you will get a skill set and a tool that is absolutely transformational for your business. Thanks. Sorry, Brenda.
You're okay, Kieran. Many, many thanks for that. That was really, really insightful. Nice to see it working in practice. But look, we've only a few minutes left, so I just want to wrap up, and then I'll open the floor for any questions. Just want to signpost to further support that's out there to help anyone thinking of applying to the programme or to the fund, sorry. So ourselves at Queen's, I'll come back to that. Further education colleges are all signed up to this as well. Ulster University, fantastic smart manufacturing hub there. Your local authorities, local councils, programmes like the Go Succeed can be useful. Innovate NI, and maybe you have other mechanisms, maybe mentors and advisors to your business. A lot more information on these various bodies that are part of the DTFF is available on their website. So please do go and have a look. And if there's one technology maybe more so applicable to you than others, you can find out which one of these bodies would be best to speak to. And it's all there to try and help you put your application together and get through the fund successfully. Just to flag, just at the Leadership Institute here at Queen's, we do run a number of executive education programs around some of these technologies. So we have strategic change leadership for digital transformation and emerging technologies, and then the analytics side of things as well. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, have a look at some of those courses. I mentioned that this webinar is a part of a series of webinars. We do have a YouTube channel which holds all of the archive of recordings that we've had in terms of the previous webinars. So feel free to go back and have a look at those in your own time. And then I'll just open up the floor to any questions from anybody. I'll just check the chat, or just unmute yourselves and feel free to ask either myself or Kieran.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yes, Des, you have your hand up there. Fire on.
Question to Kieran. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, clear as a bell, Des.
Brilliant. Kieran, your presentation was fascinating because my background actually was a wee bit on Brexit planning for the department. So very interesting about the sort of east-west and west-east movement of goods. Does your system would include sort of part loads and mixed loads for lorries, or does that complicate things?
No, it actually doesn't. It's a great question, Des. So groupage was turned off, unfortunately, because of the risk. But it's down to policy, Des. But yes, it can. We could turn groupage on in the morning, actually. It's down to proof that the seal wasn't opened or tampered with, Des. But yes, the policy unit has that one at their feet because it is impacting economic growth across the region, and it's also increasing our carbon footprint, Des. But that's a fantastic question.
It's great work, and well done.
Thank you. Dennis. You're on mute.
I'm on mute. I'm on mute. I just wondered, in the sort of blockchain for supply chains, and really the Walmart one was an example, but there is a hierarchy of the membership. Would that be correct, in the sense that somebody decides who can join the blockchain? So I guess that the farmer at one end is very much in an unequal relationship with Walmart. So how does that actually work?
That's interesting. Actually, the farmer is in control, Dennis, because without the farmer's produce or livestock, the restaurant or the producer or the retailer is at a very heavy disadvantage. Now, there is no hierarchy. It is, if you remember, Brenda, it's about consensus. So let's say, for example, you're applying red tractor. So the red tractor consensus would apply to the blockchain. Your animal or your produce would have a marker, and you would input your data as a good actor, as a trusted trader, onto the blockchain, and therefore your price to the wholesaler would be hidden, so commercial values can be taken off, but your proof of provenance, because you'll note that anything that moves across borders also has to have a certificate of origin, and that certificate of origin is here to give our farmers a voice. So it's there to support the emotional connection between the farmer and the consumer. And I remember being in a meeting last week with Marks and Spencer's, where the head of Marks and Spencer said, if I could put farmers in store, my product sales would go up by 100%. And it's exactly true. Our job as technologists is to give your product a voice on a very busy stage. And Northern Ireland grass-fed products, organic products, or anything should have that voice. Dennis, so your question is spot on, but no, farmers and producers are at the heart of everything that we should be doing, and it's about policy thereafter.
Because I just wondered, if you take things like sort of the older technologies like EDI and all, there was very much a hierarchy there, and that the supplier company had to conform to supplying data to the retailer or whatever, So that's very interesting. Yeah.
There is a gentleman, I think, on the call, Jerry, if I'm correct. This is where I was saying your data is very valuable, and as a farmer or producer, your data has a value, and it's about using that data for your benefit. There is a very prominent family here in Northern Ireland that are focusing on farm data and the provenance of that data, and the DTFF fund is there to enable that data transformation, and using that data is very, very valuable, but always, always, always hold on to your data.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's very good. Okay.
Thanks, Dennis. I may have called out the wrong Jerry. Sorry.
You're okay. I think we're just coming up to our time there, Kieran. Anyway, sorry, just say one participant just typing there. Very good, Mary. Point well made. Brilliant. Listen, Kieran, a thank you from ourselves for coming along today and taking the theory to life and showing us some practical application of the blockchain technology. And thank you everybody for joining the session. I hope you found it useful. The recording of this will be available on our YouTube channel along with the other webinars as well. Nice to see you today. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.